tēnā koutou e tātua ki a ranganui rawa ko papatua nuku, tēnā kaurua he whare e tū nei, tū tono, ki a tātou e hunga ora, kua hinga he tōtara e te waio nui ai tānei, e mātua hawk, haere hari atu rā. He mihi rangatira tēnei ki a tātou, e ngā manuhiri, mā kai mahi, no mai haramai, ki tēnei hui. Ko Hinurewa te hau takawingoa, ko Maniapoto tūwhare tō Ngāti Raukaua tōka māma, ko Ngāti Hine, whakatōhia, Ngāti Kahanunu, tōka papa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā koutou katoa.
Kia ora.
So welcome everybody to this session. Us wonderful, beautiful women are absolutely delighted to be here. And we're going to get straight into it. So before I continue, I just want to bring up a point. How many of you know that tomorrow is the 50-year celebration of Bastion Point? Quite significant, I think, that this is taking place and that Mātua Hawk has passed away. And I just want to acknowledge that because it sets a real precedence for within Auckland business and society that 506-day occupation has meant that the footprint of Ngāti Whātua has had significant change since that particular time. So I do want to recognise mana whenua to this rohi here. I'm now going to turn my attention to these beautiful women who are here. Many of you may already know them. So we have Tania Pouwhare and Trina Tamati with us. Both of them, their accolades are huge. I feel minute in their presence. Or maybe that I've just got older and I've forgotten what I've got up to along the way. Anyway, Tania is of Ngāi Tūhoe and the General Manager of the Community and Social Innovation Department of Auckland Council. Her accolades are Honorary Fellow of the Engineering New Zealand, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Fellowship of Social Equity, Co-Chair of the Māori Economic Development Advisory Board, and represents the National Iwi Chairs Forum on the WorkSafe Partners Council. You may also know that last year she commissioned a report with Burl, which is round Te Ohanga Māori Tāmaki Makaurau, which is the Māori economy for Tāmaki, for Auckland. And it's very evident from that report that the Māori economy, dare I be provocative within this room, has been ignored. Just let you take that in for a few seconds. Thank you. Next, Trina Tamati. Kia ora, Trina. Lovely to meet you.
Tēnā koe.
Trina is of no Uri Ahau o Ngāti Kahanunu me Ngāti Mutanga Hoki. She is the ex-CEO of NRL, Auckland Nines, and until COVID hit, decimated the arts, culture and events industry. She was the Managing Director of Ticketek New Zealand. Now that would have been a huge job and aroha mai to what took place in COVID within that industry, just huge. And most recently is leading the EMA's participation in the active Tāmaki Makaurau program, which is specifically designed to move Auckland businesses forward after the past couple of years of lockdowns. What I look forward to hearing from Trina is the need for equity and partnerships in order to grow, which aligns nicely with the Te Tiriti o Waitangi, so we hear more from that. So, what's the saying? We've got 3 questions. 2 of these questions I'm going to present to these wahine individually. Now, when you hear their kōrero, I am going to ask you for questions, so please be prepared. Those questions need to be concise, clear, and to the point. If they are not, I will be evaluating you. Just saying, I'm really quite a lamb, honestly. So, the questions for Tania, Tania and Trina. So here we go, Tania. So we've talked a bit about this when we met, a few weeks ago and had a kōrero rei. And of course, your latest Māori economy report on Tāmaki and the recent stats that have been released have said that Māori is plateauing. Now, there was another word used, but I can't use that one, and I'm not even going to go there because it actually kind of hurts at the core. So tell us, why is Māori business plateauing within Tāmaki Makaurau currently?
Well, tēnā koe te maraikura. Ka tautoko au tō mihi aroha ki te whānau pane a Matua Joe, ki Ngāti Whātua o Rākei. Moi mai rā i te moingaroa he te rangatira. Ki te hunaura, tēnā koutou. So I think this session is actually called A Tale of Two Cities because that's what we live in. So we're hearing about, record low unemployment, but we're not hearing the caveat unless you're Māori or Pasifika and live in Tāmaki. Now COVID hasn't caused this. This is entrenched inequality that has been around for decades. It started in 1973 and it has been a perpetual vicious cycle. And it takes forever for Māori to recover and a long, slow trudge back to the starting line. And a bit further in, I'll do my shock and awe with the data. And that's not a tale of misery, it's a call to action. We're at 5 to midnight on lots of things, and that includes inequality in our largest city and our only global-facing city in the country. 20% of the citizens here are Māori and Pasifika, and it's a really, really bad idea to have more than a quarter of your population and the lion's share of young people, our future tax base, alienated from the economy. So the diminishing is not new. This has been, and even if I just go back to the GFC, we have taken much, much longer to recover. It took us till 2016 for Māori business numbers to get to where they were in 2007. Now, this is unacceptable. And when our businesses came back, they came back with 11% fewer employees. Now, I'll talk a bit later on, because Trina's got some awesome insights into this as well. But this is a totally predictable pattern. We should by now, we've had 40 years of this pattern, we should by now have the good tools in our kete to not just mitigate the harm and keep a cap on it, but to actually create catalytic investments and provide opportunities that enable Māori to not just survive through it and then do the long trudge back to the start line, but to come out on the other side ready to thrive and to leapfrog the misery. We have got to short circuit what, Tracy McIntosh, who is the Chief Science Officer for Ministry of Social Development, calls the slow violence of poverty. This is a moral issue. This will be a test of our moral compass, of how well our poor citizens can come out through the other side of this.
Goodness gracious. So, Trina, when you hear that, a test of our moral compass, and of course we've had that conversation also, haven't we, around having to rewrite the social contracts of what they look like for our economy currently. And of course when you consider that we have to, well, in relation to the research, we've got to test, validate, look at this research around Māori business and entrepreneurship. In your perspective, how do we rewrite the social contract for Indigenous people within this community? Can we?
Yes, we can, absolutely. E mihi atu nei tēnā koutou katoa. He whakaro tuatahi māku ki ngā mana whenua o Ngāti Whātua o rā kei ngā mihi mai aha atu ki a koutou katoa. Yes, we can. We can definitely rewrite that, but it's going to take some effort. And I guess my wero or my challenge to you all today, as very, very clever, wise people in the room, is how do we do that? And I'm going to give us some pretty practical, sound thoughts or thought starters on where we can go to from here. But first, I want to paint a little bit of a comparative picture, I guess. There's over 60,000 Māori businesses in the New Zealand economy. Only 16,000 exist here in Tāmaki. The Māori economy is worth nationally $70 billion, or just shy of $70 billion per annum. Only about 13 billion, or close to 13 billion, sits here in Tāmaki. So we're a long way off the national. The Māori economy nationally is growing faster than the New Zealand general economy, so it's important to us that we get on this waka. We are diversifying nationally at rapid knots. So once upon a time, and still probably about 30-35% of our asset base sits within agriculture, forestry, fisheries. We are now, which equals about 66%, diversifying into markets such as real estate services, construction, wholesale, and I'll come onto that one, manufacturing. Over 870 Māori manufacturers exist in this country, employing over 41,000 people. So we're talking big numbers and we're talking scale, but Tāmaki is lagging. In Tāmaki, the gap between Māori and non-Māori is widening. Since 2010, there has only been just over 5, Tania will be able to probably talk to the exact number, just over 5% growth in Māori businesses here in Tāmaki Makaurau. And it's just, that gap is getting wider and wider. And that is where the hard sort of facts start to drop in and we go, okay, hang on a minute, what's that all about? In Tāmaki, wholesale for Māori businesses, I think we hold about a quarter or slightly less than a quarter of business here in that, whereas the national average is only 5%. Māori authorities in terms of export, we're looking, we're speaking to over $750 million per annum exporting goods across the globe. Private SMEs, small to medium enterprise businesses, 202 million per annum of goods around the globe. Now most of that, or a big chunk of that, is into Australia, and we know that there's a high population of Māori over there, but equally we've got Māori all around the world. The UK is a big one, Central America is a big one, Singapore and other ethnicities, other countries within the Asian Pac are big too. And we know that the demands are there for export. So for those of you that are in any of those worlds or any of those sectors, the question becomes to you, how can we help those SMEs particularly, and we'll all appreciate that SMEs within New Zealand across the entire economy are very important for the backbone of this country and what they contribute economically to our growth, to our jobs, to our trade, to our supply. How can we help SMEs and those privately owned businesses, there's over 60,000 of them, or 16,000 here in Tāmaki, to really scale up? The conversation now is not about startup so much, although they are equally important. It's about scaling up. How can we scale up those private enterprises?
Yeah. Tania, on that note, have you got any advice based on what Trina just asked us? Because currently, 90% of the Māori economy asset base is in Tāmaki, isn't it?
Yep.
And that's in privately owned businesses, as you're stating.
Yeah.
So advice to our audience, what is it?
Yeah, so I guess it's ensuring that we're all starting off with the same definition of what is the Māori economy. And it is more than inputs and outputs and business and jobs. It's about unpaid labour, it's mahi aroha, it's the flows of resources and energy between us as humans, between us and the natural world, ira tangata and ira atua, far more involved than the simple way that I'm going to talk about it. But as has been said, the 89% of the asset base here in Tāmaki is in the hands of privately owned businesses. So it is not in the hands of collectives. So we need to be making sure that we are backing private businesses, and one of our superstar Pacifica businesses, Trail Group, that we work really closely with, is on next, and is a really good example of the talent that we have. I'll start off with the stuff that's not great and then come to the bright spot. So when Māori went in, and Pacifica, and I'm talking here about Māori, but we are equally as engaged in the prosperity and the thriving of Pacifica people. Generally, you take a Māori stat, you multiply it by 1.5, and that's where Pacifica are in this city. And so by the time we went into into COVID and the first lockdown, our incomes hadn't recovered back in real terms to 2006. So we went in already on the back foot. And in 2018, between 2013 and 18, the need for government assistance had trebled. Now, when Bill looked at why that was, it wasn't job seeker, so it wasn't unemployment, because that had declined. It wasn't lone parent, that had declined. So it wasn't the traditional benefits that we think of. It was transfers to Māori workers. So this is essentially an explosion in in-work poverty. In 2018, there was a deficit between, a $1 billion deficit between the income into Māori households and the spending on everyday consumer items. So not buying Teslas or anything like that, basic stuff. A $1 billion deficit just in Tāmaki, as opposed to a $22 billion surplus for non-Māori households. Wealth, it's even worse. The median wealth for Māori is about 25,000, I think, compared to 114,000 for Pākehā. Unemployment took us 11 years to get back to pre-GFC employment rates. During that 11 years, the average unemployment rate was 11.3%. It hit a high of 14.8% in 2010. And then when we finally returned to 7.8%, which was pre-GFC, that's no victory, actually,
yeah, totally.
returning to that. And 61% of that time, that recovery time, we were in double-digit unemployment rates for well over half of it. Now, Pākehā and Asian peoples in this city have never been in double-digit unemployment. Now, one of the things that gets, that is used to belt us around the head is, oh, you're unqualified. It's an education issue. No, it's not. We have never been more learned and more qualified than at any point in the past. This is a fundamental problem and a breakdown between the education system and the labour market.
Right.
And perversely, the more qualified we become and the higher the value of the occupation, the greater the ethnic pay gap.
It's interesting you say that, because there's a question up here that says, someone recently said to me, I've just never had opportunity to employ Māori. They've never applied for a job here. What would you say to them?
You need a better tactic. So in my department, we're almost half Māori. So if I can do it, anyone can do it. This is not rock. We're not trying to defy gravity. There are plenty of awesome recruiters in Te Ao Māori. There really is no excuse. It's kind of like, well, there's no one there. It's not my fault.
Can I speak to that as well, Tania?
Absolutely.
And I just want to, look at an immediate need that's happening right now within EMA, particularly, if any of you know who the EMA are, and it's around lifting cultural competency and engagement internally first. We've got to make sure that we are walking the talk and talking the walk and walking the whatever the rest needs to be said internally, and actually creating a perception of us being welcome or welcoming Māori people to the business. There are only 3 Māori employees amongst about 95, I think, that the EMA currently have. And that, when I first started there, rung really loud in my ear that there's some work to do internally first before we can start to engage with Māori and rangatahi and attract them in. So what are you doing within your organisations to actually support Māori, to ensure that you have simple tikanga things, simple things that Māori look for when they're looking for an employer to be with for a long time and take their skill set too? I'd actually probably throw it back and say, what are you doing for them as much as, or to attract them as much as it is about them wanting to work for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you for your questions that are coming through too. They're very pertinent to the conversation. But to make really true transformation within our businesses, especially for those large businesses who are maybe wanting to employ Māori, you need to start at your SLT teams, your senior leadership teams. You need to brown them up. You need to understand what Māori and Pacific, what their requirements are, and it is back to to cultural competency. Do you have the skills to be able to employ Māori in today? Because employment today is not the employment of yesterday. It's not the employment of the 70s or the 80s. If you look at our economy, Māori are players there, but perhaps Māori will end up employing Māori, whereas non-Māori may consider, well, it's the best person for the job, rather than what the needs are of the wider community. Just saying. So I've got a few more questions here.
These
oh, look
are
there,
great.
Tanya. There's a few
These
back
are
at you
great
again.
questions.
Yeah, look at that. You know,
Yeah,
something about Māori disparity. Why do you think the business community in this room are not listening?
Yeah.
Aren't you listening?
I'm just going to put my pad of notes
Look,
down.
no,
Let's just
I think it
tackle
was a serious
these.
question. Are you listening?
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw that back to the question, back to the community actually. Here, are you listening? Because what have you heard? Can anyone just put their hand up very quickly and tell me what you've heard so far? Oh, really? So you haven't heard anything? Is that what you're saying about the Māori economy? You haven't heard a thing? Can someone please?
It's after lunch.
That's obviously after lunch and don't want to be on the record. Kia ora, thank you. That's very kind of you to say that. Thank you so much. I do appreciate that. Could you just say that again a bit louder for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. I think I would say the two messages I've taken away so far are that employment and unemployment are unfairly distributed. That, in fact, I take a third message that's not related to education. That education is there, and you've just got to look for it. And number three, it's not that hard. We just need to get on with it.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate that. Look, you know, we've been working alongside each other for far too long to actually have these types of conversations. Sometimes they're really hard, but the only thing that defines us and differentiates us is the fact that we're based by tikanga, te ao Māori. That's the only difference. So, you know, as we can see more and more learning te reo Māori, understanding mātauranga Māori practices, we see within organisations more Māori culture being included, but at the industry level, at the business level, it's determining what value you see of that and which culture wins out. At the end of the day, neither culture wins out. It's actually about partnership. Once again, good questions, thank you, which is going to drive me, because I know we're running out of time and this conversation is a big one, but I'm just going to throw it back because I think we've ended up, for me, we've ended on a good question, which is about the tiriti and what role does the tiriti play within our conversation. And I'm not talking about co-governance either. We're not going to go there today. However, the tiriti has becoming a very clear, it has always been there as a guiding document for partnership. But as we move forward, based upon the information and stats we have, especially around Ohanga Māori, what's your thoughts on that, ladies? Wahinima?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. If we continue to have these entrenched socioeconomic disparities in Article 3, which is an article around equality, can never be realised. But I think it's more than just te tiriti. What we do now, the decisions we make, where we decide to place our bets, either by design or by default, will be rewriting the social contract. At some points, the social fabric is going to give, and we need to be reweaving that social fabric. So one of the things, you know, in addition to te tiriti, is actually about, you know, we use as a conceptual framework and translate that into meaningful and tangible action, is an economy of mana, which the late great Professor Mānuka Henare was a champion of that, and Dr. Kiri Dell and Dr. Jason Mika are the next generation. And this is a complete reset and fundamental reset in how we think about resources, how we think about the distribution of those resources, how we think about our relationship to the natural world. For me, if we don't crack this challenge, and if we decarbonise the economy and we leave the worst parts of the economy intact that continue to treat Māori and Pasifika as a reservoir of contractable labour, which is exactly what happens, then we will have failed. There is no plan B for inequality either. I mean, it's really telling. Māori unemployment doubled from last quarter to the quarter before. Why? Because when we were in lockdown, the jobs that Māori and Pasifika were doing were considered essential. As soon as that lockdown was lifted, hit the dole queue. And we had a doubling of unemployment. So for all the sacrifice that Māori and Pasifika have made, more than anyone else in this country, we're rewarded with low incomes, in-work poverty, and unemployment, that we're on the ascent now. We should be looking out for 15% unemployment. So I think there is a really, really important mindset shift that's needed if we are going to really short circuit the inertia, or and Wellington is part of this equation, but so is the market as well, and we're going to need both to do their absolute best in creating a fairer and more equitable economy.
Thank you, Tania. Trina?
I guess I'm going to appeal a little bit, be a bit softer, well, not softer, that's impossible with me, but a bit less direct. But, you would have heard probably a little bit in the media lately around most New Zealanders prioritise a fair go. There's been some media with the hui, etc. last week talking about, ironically, co-governance. But, most New Zealanders, or the majority of New Zealanders, prioritise a fair go. We like to tend to back, the underdog, so to speak. Unless, hang on, I'll caveat that by saying, unless you're the Wallabies or the French and you're playing the All Blacks, all gloves are off. Okay? Or if you're a leaguey like me, if the Maroons are playing the Blues, don't you dare wear maroon in my house. But, as Hinurewa said at the outset, there's becoming the increasing awareness of the enduring effects of colonisation of Māori. There is a growing or increasing affinity or understanding or desire to understand our country's history. And I think that's more and more becoming a thing for non-Māori now, which is fantastic. And Te Tiriti becomes a really important tool or resource for the justification of why these types of conversations need to happen. Equity, partnerships, participation, all essentially end up in one place, a seat at the table. I've recently just come off one of the best collaborations and proof that it can work with Activate Tāmaki Makaurau in moving businesses forward. And the program itself, led by MB and Tātaki Auckland Unlimited, just recently, which helped, I think, close to, and Pam, you might be able to correct me here, over 13,000 businesses here in Tāmaki. Māori and Pacifica through Whāriki, through PBT had a seat at that table the whole way through, right from the steering group. There were Māori and Pacifica workstream leads, and what came out of that was a fantastic co-design process, fantastic collaboration process, weekly hui that everybody participated in and had an equal share of voice in, and it was a massive success in terms of engaging and reaching those harder to engage with communities. And I'm not just talking Māori and Pacifica, I'm talking the Chinese business network and much further abroad into the Indian and other communities within Tāmaki Makaurau. And that, in its simplicity, is really all it takes: a seat at the table and a consideration for equity, for voice, participation, and partnership in its truest sense of form of collaboration. That's it. It's as simple as that.
Can I just quickly answer that question
Yes.
about regions?
Tania's name's on the screen.
Which one?
So why is the Māori economy thriving in other regions more than
yes,
Tāmaki? That's a very good question. That's because the support that is available is anyone but urban centres. So when after the first COVID budget, $50 million business support, except Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. Another $50 million, except Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. Jobs for Nature, $1.2 billion. How much did South Auckland get? $1 million over 2 years, creating the princely sum of 4 entire jobs. Now there is, as Phil talked about it this morning, there is a particular view in Wellington that needs to be seriously disrupted, or else we're going to have more of the same. And this is something that it's a real threat. It's a real threat if we don't have the government of the day backing our Māori businesses here and backing better economic outcomes for all Māori and Tāmaki. And if we keep being the poor cousin to the regions, it just makes no sense.
Yeah. Look, whoever, thanks Marge joining for that question, you cannot compare Auckland with the regions. You just can't. It's different, so different. This is a big global city with 4 regions, a macro region with quite different themes, and that, for each area, you just cannot compare one area in, let's go, North Shore compared to South Auckland, you cannot compare it. You really can't. So though that question is appreciated, is that if I was, as I live and work in the regions now, though I still see myself as an Auckland born and bred girl, is that it's just different for us up there, It's about core sectors that drive us. It's about leadership, and also to wear a smaller footprint. We work on a more of a micro footprint. Hey, there's another question here. Thank you, Nicola from Akina as well. Tupua, yes, Ani Fitsamanu, we love her. Why? Because she's out there doing the hard yards. She knows and understands what the needs are of the business. Also, too, she's getting to the graduates, the graduates who are coming out of our universities, who are getting qualified, and she's tracking down those businesses. So if there are businesses in here that you haven't connected with Tapatua, you connect, because if you're wanting the future now, those are the people that you want, Māori and Pacific, who are coming out, who are saying, hey, I want jobs, I want to be working in the construction, I want to be working in the health, I want to be working within manufacturing and logistics, because that's where our future is. Retelling on the last panel, how do we get business to invest in and connect relevant future programs and employment to our own tamariki and rangatahi? Well, Tupatoa is an example. Ladies, have you got other examples you want to give?
Yeah, the best employers of our people are Māori businesses. So we represent 6.5% of all businesses here in Tāmaki, but employ 14% of all Māori employees. Disproportionate impact. We've got 1,000 Māori and Pasifika businesses who are part of our Amotai Supply Diversity Intermediary. They're employing 15,000 FTEs. Like they are a proposition not just for entrepreneurship, but for employment as well. And so our focus is on growing the business opportunities for them. They then can employ more of our people, and then we spin out even more entrepreneurs. That's how it works in Māori and Pasifika economies.
Thanks. And I'm just going to go, thank you, Joey, from Generation Zero. Do you have any tips for organisations that are currently in a journey to decolonise and amplify tangata whenua? Interesting.
That's
Tips for organisations
I know
to
one.
decolonise. Yeah, go for it.
The better the effort is in your pronunciation, the faster we're going to get there. Tāmaki Makaurau. Kia ora. I don't know how that sounds to your ears, but it really hurts mine. If we can just take that little step towards pronouncing our kupu correctly, our words correctly, it goes a long way to building and building on what we're trying to do in terms of decolonising business. Employing more Māori, helping pay parity with those people so that we have that divide in terms of in-pay poverty, I think is the name that we call it. Really look at your workforce. How are you supporting them? Both Māori and Pasifika. How are you supporting them? We take a very whānau approach with everything we do, and we are, okay, yep, all right. So yeah, I'll wrap it up there.
It's always terrible when you see a countdown.
It's actually like full-on flashing at me. I'm like,
flashing, 45, 36, what can we jump in?
It's like a bomb.
And there's more questions and they're really good.
I know, and there's only 2 more questions left to go. But I have a question back to you in the audience. First question is, what's the comfort level? 1 being, 2, 3 being, so can I just get a raise of hands? What's the comfort level here? Is it feeling good or not good? Yeah? Just raise of hands. Comfort level, good or not good? Good? Not good?
Get off the stage.
Not good, that's good. How many of the organisations here have got employing Māori people currently? Yes. Fantastic. How many of you are learning te reo Māori? Wow. Fantastic. How many of you are about to learn te reo Māori? And if you're not, I hope you're learning another language, and it better be a Pasifika one. Yeah. Papai. Well, I've just now gone 8 minutes over time, but I'm sure Wendy will allow me to just do a minute. And to those 2 anonymous questions that we haven't answered as yet, I hope that there was something in there around how to support Tāmaki Makaurau business partners, building skilled and rangatahi pathways to work. I'm sure one of us can actually talk to you afterwards about that. And, the other question just went, but that's okay.
A real
I'm
kick-off.
sure I'll find out later about it. Oh dear, I was being so good. So here we go. This is my takeaway to you, and I hope you've got some other takeaways that you will share with us afterwards. The biggest takeaway I can take away is this. It's about equity, it's about partnership, it's about voice, it's about a seat at the table. Ne? The treaty, how old is it now? 200 years. Yeah?
Yeah.
We're still asking for a seat
180.
at the table. Do you think it's time we stopped asking for a seat at the table and that we just did it and got on with the business? When we talk about rewriting the social contract, it's about the whole of society, not only governments, but also social activists. I hope there's some in the room tonight. It's about us as Indigenous people. It's about women, right here. It's about scientists who are in the room. We all have a role in building and redesigning a new social contract that serves the interest of we the peoples and serves as an expression of cooperation for social interest and common good for humanity and nature. Sounds good, doesn't it? But I can't take credit for that. That is coming directly from UNESCO. Directly from UNESCO. They also go on to say Indigenous people's right to participate in decision making is key to achieving genuine reconciliation between you and I. Therefore, a new social contract must also address the legacy of exclusion and marginalisation, which is what Tania has shared with us, and affecting Indigenous peoples through their meaningful and effective participation in the obtainment of their free, prior and informed consent, which is what Trina has talked about. So, the next time you look at the tiriti, and you look at it in the 3 articles that are there, look at the Article 3 under that things are dwindling and why, and what role do you play to effectively support Māori and Pacific development within the community of Tāmaki Makaurau. The next time you look at the treaty, look at Article 2, specifically on what are the shared resources and needs that our people require. And in Article 1, it is all about you and I. How can we work more effectively? How can we ensure that we're meeting the needs of our communities, not just one? Because the time is now, the future is now. So on that note, I'd like to thank you for listening to us wahine mā that are here today. Please talk with us afterwards. I might look scary, but they don't. And I appreciate for you, your listening to us. On that note, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora.